Title: The War on the HOA Queen. A shrill voice pierced the calm suburban air. I'm calling 911. This is illegal. Karen Whitmore, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, stood at the edge of my property, her face red with fury, her phone already pressed to her ear. I didn't flinch. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump of rotor blades grew louder as my helicopter descended onto the landing pad I had installed just a few weeks ago. The wind from the downdraft whipped through her carefully styled hair, sending a few loose strands flying. I smirked. Go ahead, Karen, I said, my voice calm. Let's see who gets arrested. She blinked rapidly, momentarily thrown off by my confidence. But Karen wasn't one to back down. With a dramatic inhale, she turned away and started shouting into the phone, demanding immediate police action against my illegal aircraft. She had no idea who she was dealing with. My name is Daniel Carter, and I'm a U.S. Senator. I don't flaunt my position. I don't care for the spotlight when I'm off duty. That's why I chose this quiet, upscale neighborhood just outside the city, a place where I could enjoy some peace. Or at least, that was the plan. The Homeowners Association had other ideas. HOAs are notorious for their rules, but this one had something special. Karen. She wasn't just an HOA president, she was a fanatic. A control freak who believed every property was hers to govern. For the past 2 years, she had terrorized the neighborhood, issuing citations for the wrong shade of beige, mandating exact grass heights, and imposing fines for unauthorized decorations. When I bought my home, I made sure it was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. That didn't matter to Karen. In her mind, everything was under her rule. At first, I ignored her power trips. But then I installed my helicopter pad. It wasn't some backyard DIY project. It was fully licensed, FAA approved, and built with the proper permits. I needed it for my job. It saved me hours of travel time to Washington, D.C. But Karen? She hated it. The first time she saw it, she stormed onto my property like an outraged dictator. This is absolutely unacceptable, she screeched. I had just stepped outside when she marched up my driveway, HOA rulebook in hand like a priest clutching a Bible. You can't just build an airstrip in a neighborhood. I leaned against my truck, arms crossed. It's a helipad, not an airstrip. She waved a dismissive hand. Same thing. It's loud, it's dangerous, and it violates HOA regulations. Karen, I said, keeping my tone even, I'm not in the HOA. She froze, her mouth slightly open. What? My property isn't under HOA jurisdiction. It never was. She blinked, processing. Then she straightened up and smirked. Oh, we'll see about that. I watched as she spun on her heel and stomped away. Over the next week, I received 4 separate letters from the HOA. The first was a warning that my helicopter pad was in violation of community guidelines. The second was an official violation notice demanding its removal. The third was a $500 fine. And the fourth, a threat to escalate matters to law enforcement. Each time, I sent the same response. A copy of my property deed, clearly showing I was outside the HOA's control. I figured that would end it. I underestimated Karen. She was convinced that my helipad was her personal crusade. If the HOA couldn't control me, she would. She started spreading rumors. I heard he's using it for illegal activity. She whispered to neighbors at the community pool. I bet he doesn't have the right permits, she mused at the local bakery. The noise, she lamented to anyone who would listen. It's ruining our peaceful neighborhood. Then came the complaints. Noise complaints. Safety complaints. Zoning complaints. At first, they were subtle. The occasional grumble from a neighbor. A passive-aggressive email from the HOA. But as the days passed, Karen escalated. She cornered me outside my house one evening, her arms crossed tightly. I've been more than patient with you, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. But you need to remove that pad. I exhaled slowly. Karen, I have every legal right to have it. She tilted her head, a nasty smirk on her lips. We'll see what the city has to say. That's when the official city inspector showed up at my door. Sorry to bother you, sir, he said, looking half apologetic. We received multiple complaints about an unregistered helipad. I handed him my documents showing everything was up to code. He scanned through them, nodded, and let out a sigh. This is all legal. I know Karen's been calling us nonstop about this. He shook his head. She's going to lose her mind when she finds out she wasted her time. I know. But Karen wasn't done. After the city inspector left, she took things up a notch. She waited until she heard my helicopter approaching one evening, then immediately dialed 911. "There's an unauthorized aircraft landing in my neighborhood," she shrieked into the phone. The dispatcher tried to calm her down, asking if it was an actual emergency. "Yes, it's an illegal landing strip." "What's the emergency, ma'am?" "It's lowering our property values." I wish I could have seen the dispatcher's face. The moment my helicopter landed, I saw Karen standing on the sidewalk, gripping her phone like a weapon, her eyes filled with unhinged satisfaction. Within minutes, a police car pulled up, lights flashing. 2 officers stepped out. Karen practically ran to them, arms flailing. "Arrest him. He's flying illegally." The officers exchanged a glance. Then they turned to me. "Sir, we received a report about an unauthorized airstrip." I nodded, pulled out my wallet, and handed them my FAA authorization, my permits, and one more thing, my Senate ID. One officer took a breath and exhaled sharply. "Ma'am," he said, his voice suddenly very tired. "This helipad is completely legal." Karen's eyes widened. But. Also, he added, holding up a notepad, "filing false reports to emergency services is a crime." Karen's mouth flapped like a fish gasping for air. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. She had played her hand, and she had lost. The question was, would she back down? Or was she about to make an even bigger mistake? Karen Whitmore was not the type to back down. Losing her battle against my helipad only seemed to ignite a new, more dangerous fire in her. If she couldn't beat me with HOA regulations, she was going to find another way. It started small. The morning after her failed 911 stunt, I woke up to find my mailbox knocked over. Just a coincidence? Maybe. Except that 2 days later, my garbage bins mysteriously disappeared. And then, a week later, my security cameras were inexplicably vandalized. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly who was behind it. But Karen was careful. She didn't do anything that could be directly traced back to her. Instead, she worked from the shadows, stirring the pot and rallying her most loyal HOA minions. Then came the petition. A group of homeowners, led by Karen, started gathering signatures to demand the removal of disruptive elements from the neighborhood. The document was framed as a community effort to preserve the peace and quiet of the area, but everyone knew the target: me. The wording was vague enough to avoid outright legal trouble, but the message was clear: they wanted me gone. Karen had declared war. She just had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't about to play the victim. I had spent my entire career dealing with bureaucratic nonsense, political battles, and people just like Karen, entitled individuals who believed they were above the law. I knew how to fight back. Step 1. Expose the corruption. While Karen was busy gathering signatures, I was busy gathering dirt. I hired a private investigator to dig into the HOA's financials. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for: embezzlement, misuse of funds, illegal fines levied against homeowners who dared to challenge Karen's authority. The HOA was less of a governing body and more of a personal piggy bank for its president. Step 2. Leverage public opinion. I compiled my findings into a neat, easy-to-read report and made sure every homeowner in the neighborhood got a copy. The response was explosive. Homeowners who had been paying excessive fines for years were outraged. Some had lost thousands to Karen's fraudulent fees. A few had even lost their homes. Step 3. Turn the tables. With the neighborhood in an uproar, I made my next move. I called for an emergency HOA meeting. Legally, any homeowner could request one, and with the signatures I gathered, Karen had no choice but to comply. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Karen sat at the front, her face carefully composed, but I could see the nervous flicker in her eyes. She had no idea what was coming. "We're here today to discuss the future of this HOA," I announced, my voice calm but firm. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like this association has been run less like a community organization and more like a criminal enterprise. A murmur ran through the crowd. Karen straightened her shoulders, her mask of confidence returning. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Carter," she said smoothly. "Do you have proof?" I smiled. "Funny you should ask." I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a stack of documents, and handed them to the HOA treasurer. This is a financial breakdown of every questionable transaction made under Karen's administration. You'll notice several payments to shell companies that don't exist, along with fines that were never properly documented or accounted for. In other words, the money didn't go to neighborhood improvements, it went straight into Karen's pocket. The treasurer's face turned pale as he flipped through the pages. This is serious. Karen laughed, but it was a brittle, desperate sound. This is ridiculous. He's just trying to get revenge because he didn't want to follow the rules. I leaned forward. Karen, I'm a U.S. Senator. You really think I wouldn't check the law before calling you out? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She knew she was cornered. The vote happened that night. By an overwhelming majority, Karen was removed from her position as HOA president. But that wasn't the worst of it. The financial misconduct allegations led to an official audit, and within weeks, investigators confirmed everything I had exposed. Karen was arrested. Embezzlement, fraud, wire transfer violations. The works. The HOA, now leaderless and facing multiple lawsuits, collapsed under its own weight. Homeowners voted to dissolve it entirely. For the first time in years, people were free to paint their houses whatever color they wanted, park wherever they pleased, and live without fear of arbitrary fines. As for me, I got to keep my helipad, and every time I landed my helicopter, I smiled, knowing that I had not just won a battle, I had won the war. Months later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from a group of homeowners, thanking me for what I had done. They had formed a voluntary neighborhood association, not an HOA, just a simple group of people looking out for one another. One evening, as I sat outside watching the sunset, Ted, the former treasurer, walked up to me. You know, he said, shaking his head, I never thought anyone would take her down. We all just assumed she was untouchable. I chuckled. Everyone's untouchable until someone decides otherwise. He grinned. Well, we owe you one. Big time. I took a deep breath, looking around at the neighborhood that had once been under Karen's iron grip. The tension was gone. People were smiling, laughing, living. You don't owe me anything, I said. Just enjoy the freedom. And with that, the war on the HOA queen was finally over.